Dudes to Dads, brought to you by Dad University, is a podcast to help men understand and navigate the transition of being a single dude into a family man. How do we make sense of it all? Well, we probably won't be able to, but let's go ahead and have some fun trying. And we are back.
We are back.
I'm Jason Kreidman.
I'm Alan Bush.
And this is Dudes to Dads, episode 155.
155.
It is.
That's crazy again.
How are you, Alan?
I'm great.
Really?
Yeah.
How are you doing with the holding of the microphone?
This is getting... I need to get that stand back, man. That I had a stand for people who are not aware. I'm actually holding the mic again because I had a stand. I lent it to somebody and I totally forgot to pick it up. And I usually have the stand because it lets me, operate my hands to do the production. So I just
like put it in your shirt.
And this would not work at all. With the shirt's way too big. It's a condenser mic. I can hold it kind of further away, but it's okay. It's change of pace.
But usually that's something that you'd be doing if you interviewed.
Yeah. So Jason, tell me about this.
Or you're on the news.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
You should put a little Dudes to Dads thing on that.
Well, you know what's funny? I've gotten so used to being this professional with actually having stands and screens and wind filters and the condenser mics that I actually have some other mics that you're supposed to hold. And I'm like, what's this all about?
It's awkward.
Yeah, exactly.
You want to sing?
Yeah.
So today's episode is about a topic that we find very dear here at Dudes to Dads.
Dear.
It is about empathy.
Yes.
And specifically, we've talked about empathy as it relates to our children and parenting, but I wanted to talk about empathy a little bit more as it relates to your relationship. Mm-hmm. And that can be, in most cases, your marital or your love relationship, but it can be other relationships.
Sure.
So the title for this one is Empathy Can Change Your Life for the Better. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty strong statement, but I've said it before. I will say it again. Empathy is the single most important parenting technique I've learned. If somebody was to say to me, what is the biggest, what's the best piece of advice? What is the best thing you've learned? Whatever. Over the last couple of years, I believe that empathy has affected my relationship with my children and just how I deal with things the greatest out of any one specific thing.
It's interesting. I've always been a big believer of that, and I'm fairly empathic when it comes to. I have a lot of empathy, but I also have this kind of weird extra perception. My grandma would call it ESP, extrasensory perception, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that I'm just hyper aware of empathy, and I think it's because I understand how people feel at the time they're feeling them, and I also put that as one of my top criteria for any relationship, really, but especially ones that you're involved with that are like marital or a relationship that you're dating somebody.
Right.
It's I have a top 5 things, and that's one of them.
Yeah, I can say that I don't think that I, in my past, was very empathetic. I think I was a little bit more selfish. I just didn't think about another person's perspective or something. And it's not that I just don't think it definitely was, it wasn't top of mind, That has changed dramatically.
Yeah.
And as I've done more work and it's the biggest thing for me that has changed kind of how I do things.
Do you think you had to adapt to this due to having children, or is it?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I mean, I think not that you have to. I think it is just
a natural
because I did.
Yes.
It has affected me in a positive way. Because there's tons of people who have children and are not empathetic.
Good point.
Yeah. I think it came from me studying the parenting and studying that. Also, in a couple classes that I attended and some trainings and, seeing people that deal with things differently than I do.
Yeah.
Also with, which I'm going to talk about, is with my wife. And for a while and for a decent amount of time of that push and pull that happens in a relationship where just you're not really understand or not even really trying to understand the other person. You're kind of just in your own lane, and so I wasn't for so long understanding why we were having arguments. Mm-hmm. I just didn't get it. Mm-hmm. And then started to understand that and empathy and the different aspects of it. And it's just amazing how that's affected it in a positive way. So that was the other part of what I was going to say. that empathy has saved me in so many situations from getting upset. It's just helped me connect with my children, et cetera. But I would venture to say that it also has been one of the most important things that's positively impacted my marriage as well.
That's a great statement.
And I think my wife would agree with that.
Yeah.
And so part of that is to really understand what empathy is. I think that's kind of where we have to start, because people hear the word, they may not really understand it. So empathy is defined as the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Mm-hmm. We often say, it's putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. Mm-hmm. That's a saying that we use. So I want to break it down a little further. So I've created 2 new words. Remember, we used to create words all the time. Yeah. I am coining these. Okay. This is going to be my words because nobody in the world has ever said it.
Patent pending, trademarked.
Yeah, I'm just kidding. Okay. People have. I looked it up on Google and I didn't find it. I was like, maybe I can look this up and find out what it's about, and it's not. So I think I am kind of making these up.
Okay,
but they seem to make sense for me. Number 1, surface empathy.
Okay,
which kind of makes sense. It's self-explanatory, but this is relating to someone, it's relating to someone and showing them that you understand what they are saying. And it could also be said that you're able to see something from their perspective. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's not the definition that I was just talking about. That's not true empathy.
Right.
That's understanding somebody. But I would use the term surface empathy because you do understand what they're saying or what they're going through, whatever. Okay. Mm-hmm. The other part is sort of probably what is really empathy. I'm calling deep empathy. To me, that's really feeling the emotion and really understanding at a deep level what somebody is, going through or talking about or feeling in order to relate to them.
Yes.
So it's a much deeper level, hence deep empathy versus surface empathy.
Sure.
I mean, I'm a wordsmith, that's what I do here.
Right.
So I'm going to give you examples of each. So surface empathy, I think this happens in situations often with our children. So a lot of the stuff that we deal with our children, I think is surface empathy.
Right.
And, I guess it can happen maybe it happens at work too, and basically one example was when my daughter was 5 years old and she couldn't find her shoes before school, I understood that it was a big deal for her.
Yes.
But did I really feel emotion for that? No.
Right.
I understood that it was a big deal for her, right, but I didn't really feel it. Mm-hmm. I just was like, oh, you know what? I can see that's a big deal for her. And so I said that. I said, wow, I could see that would be a big deal. But I wasn't, it didn't strike me. It didn't, and that's really what empathy is. It's actually like putting yourself in the place of them to feel that emotion. So it's much deeper.
Right.
So that's why I'm just calling it surface empathy. I think it's still empathy. It's still a very positive thing.
Well, does it go back to what you said originally, saying that, I can process this and understand that this is a big deal for you. And that's pretty much just understanding. Like you said, surface is just a kind of an innate understanding of what's going on in their emotional realm.
Yeah. Well, the definition said to understand and share the feelings. So to me, those are 2 different things. Correct. Understanding it is sort of the surface stuff. Sharing it is the deep.
Yes.
That's why I was breaking it down a little further. I think there's 2 different levels of empathy.
Yeah.
That's why.
Right.
And so for the deep empathy, an example of that is I recently heard that, and this is true, I recently heard that a friend's parent passed away.
Right.
This was very recent, just a couple days ago.
Yeah.
Now, this hit me really hard in my gut. Like I was, crying. I felt horrible. And I had that really strong emotion because I was recalling what I went through.
Yes.
And so realizing how painful that is and like thinking to myself, oh goodness, like I remember that. Mm-hmm. Like that, they have to be in so much pain right now.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, was the deep empathy. Like I really understood what they were going through. I've been there. I have felt it. That's the case. So that was something where for that person, I totally get it. Like I understand it, you know, and not just understand, but I felt it. So that's where I'm kind of making the difference. And so when we are talking about empathy as a general term, I think we're talking about both of those levels.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times when we're talking about our child and I guess our spouse too, we use surface empathy a lot.
Sure.
Which kind of just means like, yeah, I get it. I understand it. I see your perspective. That's cool, you know, and you support that or whatever, but you're not getting into that deep level of understanding and the feeling of it and how that really must feel.
And it is really important for relationships to have that. It was one thing to have. I mean, I have that even with coworkers, where people that I'm talking with, they feel more comfortable talking to me about things that are going on than they might someone else because I have a certain amount of empathy that I can discuss with them.
Right.
And I'm validating not only what their problem is, but the feeling behind that problem.
Right.
And that's what I'm trying to get to the root of, because it's one thing to say, I don't have enough memory in my computer, but it's another thing to be like, and then you're super frustrated with something and it's like, well, what's really going on here?
Yeah.
Why are you so upset? Is this okay? Like what's happening? And I think that people feel like they feel validated. And that conversely, why I also approach people in a more positive light, because I feel a lot. Like, I mean, this, I don't want to go back to me, but it hits me.
Oh, it's all about you.
Yeah. No, but you know what I mean? It does. It like hits me a lot. Like,
I can attest that you are an empathetic person.
Yeah.
You have that
I have
relation to people.
Yeah. And I sometimes have to shut it down or shut it off in some cases. But in most cases, I try to create a positive environment because it does reflect back on myself.
Right.
And if they're having a good time or if they're at least feeling good
about what they're
other
doing.
People? Well, yeah. And then it also like, hey, I feel good. Right. So it is not completely altruistic.
Right.
It sounds like it is, but it isn't. It's like I do that so they can make me feel better about what's going on.
Totally. Yeah. So, and as you can see, I mean, both of these are important, both the surface and the deep. So,
right.
and I feel like they can impact, all the different relationships around you. So, how does it specifically help your marriage? That's what I want to talk about a little bit more.
Sure.
Is how can empathy affect your marriage or your relationship, whatever relationship that you're in? So here's a couple of ways. So the first one, you realize that it's not always about you. And that's a big revelation.
Yeah.
So I'll give you another example. Suppose your spouse gets really mad at you. And the level of emotion that they are getting out, it's really just doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. Like it's not warranted. It's something where you're like, well, like that doesn't fit. The time doesn't fit the crime.
Sure.
like how you're acting is not like the fork was misplaced. Like that doesn't equate. It doesn't make sense.
Right.
And it happens on both sides, both men and women and everything. So in my past, I think I would have probably, let's say if I was in that situation, I would have yelled back, gotten really upset, taken it personally, be like, how dare you talk to me like that? And, et cetera. It was about me and how that affected me and how could you do that to me and that kind of stuff. And I think that's a common thing that we all do. It's like, I'm not going to be treated like that. However, when you have empathy in your toolbox and you're thinking about that on a regular basis, and now for me, empathy is at the forefront of how I think of things, that I make a great effort to try to understand if there was something else that happened before that interaction, which you had just talked about with your coworkers. So maybe something else is bothering her. Did she get in an argument with somebody else? Did the children frustrate her before I came, home? So I have a tendency now to not take things so personally.
Yeah.
And especially when I know that it really wasn't my fault or that it wasn't warranted or something. And granted, that's all an evaluation. You may think that something's not a big deal, but it could also be a big deal to somebody else.
Sure.
So you got to be careful with that. But what I was getting at is this one is you can realize that it's not always about you. And most of the time, or I would say oftentimes, arguments are not about what is going on right then.
Right.
You're coming into the discussion with some other baggage.
Yes.
And, whether that's you're coming home from work in a pissed off mood, to, something happened to you earlier, to the other day, to how your situation is in general, whatever. It doesn't always have to do with how the other person interacted with you right then.
Right.
Maybe they just cut the straw, it was the last straw, if you will.
Exactly.
But it's not always about you.
Right.
I used to think everything was about me.
Right.
So that has helped quite a bit.
I think at some point everyone thinks that. Just whether or not you get over that or you experience something.
And it's so much more freeing when you realize that it's not.
I'm going to tell you straight out, like I'm at a level now where I honestly don't take anything personally, even if it is about me. Like I'm like, well, what's going on, really? Like
that's your problem.
Yeah. I stepped on you. Whatever. Right. It's at the bottom of my shoe. No, it's not that bad, but it's like it does become a lot easier for me to deal with things that I used to think were adverse,
right?
To not take it so personally, because a lot of 9 times out of 10 it's not really. And if it is about you, you can extract constructive criticism from it. Now, if someone's being a jerk,
it's ego.
It's an ego thing, and just let go of that ego thing,
right? So that's just realize that it's not always about you. So that's a good one. Yeah. Number 2. So as a result of number 1, because of that happening, you argue a lot less.
Yep.
So that's just the benefit of it. So you simply have a different understanding of why many arguments take place.
Yeah.
Because, you have a tendency to just realize, like I said, that it's not about you.
Yeah.
So when you can use words such as, I can totally understand why you feel that way. Like that's something that you would use in a discussion. Mm-hmm. Or I can see why that would bother you. Mm-hmm. That really diffuses a lot of situations that could normally turn into an argument.
Yeah.
And so you're just going to argue less by having empathy.
Yeah. Totally. Here's some words not to use. Meh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Try not to use that. During an argument.
My kids, I came home yesterday. They're like, who do you think would be the best meh? I'm like, what? Because they saw the Emoji Movie or something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But that's what it was. Like, who in our family is the best meh? I'm like, oh, me for sure.
Absolutely me.
They were arguing. So, okay, number 3, your spouse doesn't want a solution. They just want you to listen.
Yeah, validation.
So, yes. When you're empathetic, you're in listening mode. Mm-hmm. You are not providing advice or solving any problems. Right. When you're doing that.
Yeah. And that's contextual, because some people are talking to you to kind of get your input on some feedback thing you're doing. Like they're doing something at work, or maybe they're upset by something that you don't,
but your spouse or significant other will ask you, most generally
it comes from that.
Generally women, this is a very big generalization.
I'm going to back away from them.
They're not asking you to solve it.
Yeah.
They're just not.
Yeah.
They're saying, hey, listen, I want to talk to you and I want you to listen.
Yeah.
And I want you to understand what I'm feeling or how I'm thinking or whatever, but I'm not asking you for a solution.
Right.
Now, if they say, hey, listen, what do you think about that? Then that's something different.
Yeah, absolutely. But
9 out of 10 times it's not.
Yeah, exactly. We talked about this in previous episodes where I'm the same way with my friends or with significant others or whatever. When they try to cram a solution down my throat, I'm like, I know the answer. I just want you to pat me on the back and say it's going to be okay.
Right. So you can even repeat back what somebody's saying, just to know that they're listening. And we, can talk more about listening, and we've done that. But it's important when you are being empathetic, you are in listening mode instead of talk mode and advice mode.
Right.
So that's an important one. And number 4, I really like this one. You don't have to agree to provide empathy.
Absolutely.
So this is a big one for guys to understand, because we may intellectually disagree with their perspective.
Right.
And this could be about anything, but it doesn't mean that we can't try to be empathetic emotionally.
Correct.
So realize you're putting yourself in their shoes. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to agree with what the perspective is. You're just saying, I can see how you think that way. Mm-hmm. I can understand that you're upset. That's kind of where you're going with that. And so it doesn't, for us guys who might have an ego about it, you're not giving up. If you always have to be right, you're not giving up that right to be right.
Right.
Right. Exactly. 4 rights don't make a right.
4 rights make a left.
We just made a right, 4 rights in the course of
square.
10 seconds. But that's really that's really what that means is you don't have to agree to be empathetic.
Yeah.
And it's an amazing dynamic to think about, because that's often when we're in arguments, we're trying to get our point across so that we can feel like we're correct or we can feel like we're right.
Sure.
It has nothing to do with empathy.
Correct.
So you can still be empathetic and diffuse the situation but not at saying, oh yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You're just seeing that another person has a different perspective.
Yeah.
You're agreeing to be...
You agree to disagree.
Agree to disagree.
Yeah, and I totally buy into that as well, because I feel like I've been in situations with discussions and I understand what they mean and I understand that they feel a certain way, and I'm not trying to downplay it. I'm like, okay, yeah, I get it, but maybe you're right, but here's what I'm thinking, right. But I get it. Let's just figure out how we can coexist.
Right.
It's like you don't need, like you said, I totally agree with that. It's you don't need to be right all the time.
Yeah, and that is definitely a helpful thing for marriage.
Yeah,
because we try to be right all the time.
For sure.
I mean, at least some people do. I don't.
Of course not.
And the last one, number 5, it provides connection. Mm-hmm. So when you are empathetic, you will be amazed at the connection that it can form. Mm-hmm. When somebody feels that you understand them or that you're feeling what they feel, they are more inclined to be open. They're more inclined to share. They're more inclined to feel connected.
Right.
And so, in a marital or significant other relationship, that connection is really, really important. And so when you show empathy, that provides the bridge to then have that connection.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's a really, really, really important thing. And so that's kind of, those are my things that and granted, I extrapolated from some of my own personal experience.
Yeah, for sure.
That, like I said, that, looking back at how I may have dealt with things in certain instances, I could have been a lot more empathetic in many situations of realizing like, oh, wow, I didn't realize she was going through that. Or I realized, wow, that affected her in this way. Or
it's also self-reflective. Like in a lot of cases, when you have empathy, you start understanding how you're coming across.
Oh, totally.
So then you're like, oh, I probably should phrase this a little differently.
Yeah, like, sorry that I'm yelling kids, but I had a really bad day at work.
Yeah, true. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's exactly how it.
Yeah.
You start to realize that it's not them or the people that are in front of you that you're arguing with. Yeah. It's something else. I'm having some sort of financial situation that's affecting every person that I deal with. Right. That's going to happen. Yeah. You're just going to have that sort of effect on all of those things.
For sure.
So guys, I just want to say, if there is one thing that you can learn by listening to these podcasts, it's being empathetic.
Yeah. And that's why it's been such a constant motif in the show. If you go back several episodes and probably all the way up back to the early episodes.
We've had many
discussions about
Yeah. But this, I wanted to dedicate this as it relates to the relationship. And here's the thing too, that empathy has also helped me in business. And like you said, you mentioned it, you deal it with coworkers. Yeah. I have felt that when I'm talking to prospective clients, and I do consulting and internet marketing consulting, when I talk with prospective clients, I'm really empathetic. If I'm really empathetic, I'm noticing that they're more inclined to want to do business with me.
Yes. Absolutely.
And it's a very interesting thing that when you're doing when you're in the sales process and you can be empathetic towards whether it's a small business owner, whether it's the VP who has to deal with the person above them and the politics of their organization or whatever. Yeah. When you start to be empathetic towards those things and you can actually, understand the situation that this person is in, and what they need to do and why, and all these different motivations. It's amazing how business is different.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It really is.
Yeah,
And so
I can attest to that, being in the same industry and working with, I don't even do sales. It's just that I've been on sales calls with prospects, and the reason why they bring me in is because I know how to relate to them.
Yeah.
And I'm in the operations field. I'm like, I'm not trying to sell you on anything. I actually do believe what I'm saying right now. And I believe, and I'm listening to what you're saying. And so that it helps, and it helps dealing with clients, helps dealing with your colleagues.
Right.
I mean, it helps in so many different facets of your life.
So the overall summary is go out there and empathize.
Empathize like a mad person.
Empathize with people. You know what? And we'd also like to hear from you if you have any stories of empathy. I'd love to be able to share some stories of how empathy either affected a relationship, how it changed the situation, anything relating to empathy and how you implemented it. That would be great. And if they do have something, Alan, what should they do?
They should. Email us, podcast@dudesToDads.com. You can get a hold of us on all of our multiple social media networks, Twitter, @DudesToDads, Facebook, DudesToDads.com, YouTube, this Dad University, which is, you can look a lot of great videos that Jason puts up there to teach you some things. And also Dudes to Dads is on there. And then please go to iTunes and Stitcher and Google Play or whatever it is. I keep saying iTunes. I think it's Apple Podcasts now, but whatever. Go to the one you know and find us there, and then subscribe to it and leave us some 5-star reviews and thumbs up and maybe even a few comments about empathy, #empathy, whatever you want to do.
Ooh, that's a good one.
And
hashtag empathy.
#empathy. That's the new one. So go there and leave those comments. It really helps perpetuate the show. And we read all the emails, so please just keep sending them in.
I love it.
And we love the feedback. So otherwise, it's just two guys talking into mics.
Which, that's still fun too.
We could do that if you want.
For hours. We can talk for hours.
You're right.
So with that, Alan, thank you.
Thank you.